Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of FantasyForesight.com. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Now, today we're going to be taking a look at the NFC West quarterbacks as of Thursday, August 16th.
First up, we have Jared Goff of the LA Rams. And I know for one that Ben is super excited about this player. Why don't you take it away?
I'm honestly a little upset if I'm being completely transparent. I think my guy Goff is getting disrespected.
Wow.
I think people are completely overlooking the massive steps that he took last year. He went from, in his rookie season under Jeff Fisher, from 55% completion, less than 1,100 yards, 5 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Sean McVay comes to town. In 15 games, he increases that percentage to 62. Still not great, but again, this is a second-year quarterback. He threw for 3,800 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. The man took a big-time leap last year, and it's not just because of Sean McVay. All right? Last year, Jared Goff finished as QB 10. As far as QB attempts went, he finished QB 18. He had 447 attempts. Now, let me tell you, before last year, in Sean McVay's 3 years in Washington, his quarterbacks averaged 568 pass attempts per season. I think Jared Goff is in line to see a big-time uptick in volume, and he lost Sammy Watkins in exchange for Brandon Cooks. I think that's a major upgrade. Everybody else is back. He's got a top 10-ish offensive line. No problems there. He does have one of the more difficult strength of schedules in the league, but I think that doesn't matter when you have a talented coach, you have talented weapons. This is his third year in the league. Quarterbacks take major strides in their third years if they are legitimate. I think Goff is very legitimate. And while I don't think he's going to be able to complete the same amount of improvement as he did last year, I think we're still going to see another step in his career. And I think this guy has top 5 upside this season.
Wow. Ben, I got to tell you, I completely agree with you.
Boom. Then you consider that he's going 120 to 125 in drafts. Guys going behind him, Pat Mahomes, Marcus Mariota. I'll take Jared Goff all day. Phillip Rivers, very safe quarterback. A lot of great weapons. I'm more excited about Jared Goff this year. Big Ben, concussed up and down if he's home, away, whatever. Jared Goff is my guy at that point in the draft.
Jared Goff is Total Foresight's QB 14. Like you said, he finished QB 10 last year. Total Foresight has him just slightly behind that. I completely agree with you. I think his upside is huge this season. I love where he's valued because I am going to target him as my QB2 on my team for one big reason: his upside. If I can get him to be a bench player on my team and hold him on my roster, when he explodes like you and I both think he's going to, then I'm going to deal him and double down on his value. And I'm going to make that play to solidify my team towards a championship run. Now, he also plays a huge insurance role because if my starter, whoever it is, if I am able to get a Breeze or a TB12 or something like that, if one of those guys has the freak occurrence, if they're the Aaron Rodgers this year and they go down with injury, then I'm covered because Jared Goff may even outproduce them. And if I can get him in the 120 to 125 range, then I am extremely happy and I can go into this season knowing that I either have one of the best insurance policies in place or I'm going to have a blue chip bargaining chip later in the season.
I cannot blame you for taking that approach and for viewing Jared Goff that way. However, I think at the 120 to 125 spot in the draft, there's no need to take a quarterback before him. I don't think you need to waste a roster spot. I don't think he's going to have a slow start. And to be honest with you, I think that Total Foresight would view him much higher if there was a way for us to just scrap his Jeff Fisher cursed rookie season. Because while part of that is on Goff, I attribute much more of that to Jeff Fisher's terrible offensive, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, coaching is everything. And if you don't think so, Jared Goff is proof. I mean, you go from a very average performance. Yes, he was a rookie, but he came in midway through the season and played 7 games. And then you compare that to actually having an offensive coach who knows how to scheme and draw plays, and you see the success rate. He game planned for Jared's success.
Absolutely.
And you see the massive step he took forward. But where I'm going to disagree with you a little bit is, that's fine if you want to hold off and take a quarterback late. And if you want to go with Goff, that's perfectly fine. I guess I just come from the standpoint of, I would like to take an elite quarterback because, at least in many leagues, the quarterback does score the most points on a team.
Now, see, I thought you were with me here, brother. He is an elite quarterback. You just don't know it yet. And you're now one of the people that's disrespecting my guy, just like everybody else. So that's fine. You go ahead and you pull the trigger early on one of those quarterbacks. I'm going to just stockpile talent at the wide receiver, running back, tight end position. And then I'm going to come over the top with Jared Goff at 120 and still outperform whatever quarterback you take for him.
You may very well be right, but I thought my plan was good. I'm going to take an elite quarterback early, not to say Jared's not elite, but then I'm going to back him up with Jared Goff, knowing very well that Jared could step in, outperform the guy that I took, give me some insurance, and also provide a bargaining chip to my team later in the season where I'm going to have 2 QB1s sitting on my roster, and when other guys either don't live up to their expectations or if somebody goes down with injury, I'm going to be the one in my league preying on that opportunity.
Well, and you know what? You bring up a great point about a lot of components of fantasy football that aren't often discussed, the game within the game.
Exactly.
And you're right. You do need to have the foresight to see who is going to blow up a few weeks into the season, who is going to be able to be somebody that you can really leverage for a big haul later on down the line when you're trying to make that playoff run.
That's why I love Goff so much, because I can get him later, and I think that he's going to provide tremendous value during the season when he explodes like you and I expect.
As always, it's who can you get where.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that he's the one I'm going to trade. Maybe it's the other quarterback on my roster that I'm going to trade.
Yeah.
But I want to be in a position to prey on weakness and opportunity. And I think Jared Goff gives me that.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. I think that it's going to be a really fun season to watch. You know, I can't wait for Jared Goff to start getting attention and start garnering some of the respect he is long overdue. Well, before we move on, we need to remind ourselves or make everybody aware that last year, his peers in the NFL voted him the 38th best player in the league last year. They're all smart enough to know if some guy's just a system guy, product of the system. They saw that Jared Goff is the real deal. They gave him the respect that he deserves. Nobody else in the fantasy world really is, and I can't wait to see him prove his peers right and his critics wrong this year.
I can't top that, so I'm gonna let you have the final word there.
Well, next up we've got your guy, Jimmy G.
Jimmy G. The Niners start off last season 1-10. They trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. They finish the season 5-0. Huge turnaround.
Yeah.
And that's with 2 weeks of preparation. Now he's had a full off season. Tony Romo was well publicized in his first year behind the booth last season in his analysis of games. Some people loved it. I did.
Me too.
Some people it wore on a little bit as the season went on, but I love Tony's insight. He knows the game of football, and I trust his opinion. When you can predict just about every play that's going to be run based on what you see, you clearly know the game. And I want to read to you something that Tony said about Jimmy G in a recent interview with Peter King. You cannot be in a better situation early on than Jimmy. He's been with some of the best minds you could ever be around in the National Football League. He got the foundation of Bill Belichick, who probably set his routine for future success for the rest of his career. He was around Tom Brady for 3+ years, learning through osmosis if nothing else. Jimmy could just see it in practice, and he's like, oh, now I see why he did that. You get that ability to improve at a much faster rate than you otherwise would have on your own. It's really a priceless thing for a young quarterback to be behind a great quarterback.
He's absolutely right.
And now with Kyle Shanahan, he's getting an offensive genius. I don't throw that term around lightly. Kyle really is. I would argue there's 3 or 4 guys in the league who really separate themselves as head coaches or offensive coordinators getting chunk plays. That's where Kyle really separates himself, end quote. So Jimmy G Right now, he's Total Foresight's QB 32. Now, that's strictly based on sample size because we only have 5 games under his belt. Well, we do have some additional games in New England, but...
Right. And Total Foresight can't, I'm sorry to interrupt, Jay, but I just want to explain real quick. Total Foresight can't differentiate that he's a quarterback. If he logs any games played, Total Foresight takes him as any other starter like anyone else. So as far as Total Foresight's concerned, this guy can really only be on the field like 4 or 5 games a year, which is why when you consider that fact as far as how he's viewed by our metrics, pretty amazing to me that he's still quarterback 32 despite being somebody who's only on the field for 5 games a year.
And there is some risk to that. We just don't know what he's going to be like for a complete season. So that risk is built into that ranking. Now, the part where I think Jimmy is very similar to Jared Goff, who we just covered. They are young quarterbacks with really big upside. And we talked about the value of Goff and where he's going. I love Jimmy. I think he's going to be very solid, and he is leading San Francisco on a bit of a renaissance. But where he's going in drafts, he's going 20 picks in front of Goff.
Yes, he is.
So that makes the value a little bit more difficult for me because I plan on going quarterback a little bit earlier and then grabbing a great value in Goff late. Well, Jimmy G is in that awkward in-between.
He really is.
If you're waiting on a quarterback late, he's going to go just a little bit earlier than you want to snatch somebody. Guys going right in front of him are Matt Stafford, Matty Ice, and Phillip Rivers. And those are tried and true fantasy vets that you can typically trust.
I would take all 3 of those guys over Jimmy G this year, and I wouldn't hesitate.
And the guys going behind him are Cousins and Luck.
Both probably have higher ceilings this year, to be fair.
As long as Luck comes back and plays. And then you have Goff waiting in the wings just behind that. And we already talked about his tremendous value. So for me, I like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's going to excel this season. I think he's going to be very good. Now, last season, his completion percentage was about 67%. He threw 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That actually surprised me a little bit. I didn't realize he had 5 picks last year in his 5 games for a 96 quarterback rating. Again, I think he's going to be great. His value is just in that awkward range for me where I'm probably not going to roster him on my team because I'm either going to go earlier or later.
I agree. He has a little too much unknown for me to be comfortable with, especially at that 100 to 105 spot in drafts. The one thing I will say about him is you had mentioned that when he started his 5 games and went 5-0, he had only had about 2 weeks to prepare. So that being said, the fact that he was still able to be 67% accurate is pretty impressive to me. And I kind of attribute those 5 interceptions a little bit, at least a couple of them, to that as well.
Since we're kind of playing a comparison game here between Jared Goff and Jimmy Garoppolo, one thing I do want to add in are the weapons that they have at their disposal. I don't think there can be any argument that Jared Goff has far better weapons on offense than Jimmy Garoppolo has.
Part of why I love him. We'll get to running backs here in a little bit, but teams can stack the box a lot more against Jerick McKinnon than you can against Todd Gurley.
Exactly.
Then you've got Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp and Sean McVay. I mean, I know that Jimmy G has Kyle Shanahan. I'm not sold on his weapons in San Francisco. I'm completely sold on all of his weapons that Jared Goff has in LA.
Yes, and I completely agree, and we'll get to those weapons later, but that's why I think Jimmy G might be slightly overvalued in his ADP, even though he might be a little bit undervalued in his total Foresight ranking.
I agree. The masses have recency bias, and everybody remembers that he was 5-0 and came bursting on the scene and was super exciting last year. So, of course, he did that in 5 games. That automatically means he's going to be a top 5 quarterback this year, says the public. So...
Our next quarterback is Russell Wilson, Seattle Seahawks. And boy, is this one an interesting situation.
Well, you talked about the elite and the value. This guy, to me, is as elite as they come. Russell Wilson, from day one when he started as a rookie, the worst fantasy season he ever had, quarterback 11. Next season, got a little bit better, quarterback 8. Next season, took another step, quarterback 3. That was probably a fluke, right? No, next year he sustained that quarterback 3. Next year he gutted through a bunch of injuries and still quarterback 10. Then he got right. Last year, what was he? quarterback 1.
And this year, Total Foresight has him as our quarterback 2.
Yeah.
So he is the elite of the elite. Now, this normally might be a concern. He has the 30th ranked offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
They did not address the offensive line concerns in the offseason. They did not bring him in any more weapons besides drafting Rashad Penny, who's dinged up.
Mm-hmm.
So he is going to be running for his life. Now, good thing is, he's incredible at running. He's averaged 34 rushing yards a game over his 6-year career.
Mm-hmm.
He's put up 177 career touchdowns combined rushing and passing, which is about 30 per season.
You can bank on that. Like money in the bank, he's going to bring you a total combined amount of 30 touchdowns a season. Lock it up.
Now, Vegas has them winning 9 games. I think that's very generous.
I do too. I'm surprised by that. Their defense is decimated. I think they're going to be in nothing but shootouts. Now, I'll say this, that kind of brings us to our next point.
Yeah, the Legion of Boom is crumbling. His offensive line is porous.
Yeah.
He's going to be on the run. They're going to be trailing in games, which means he's going to be throwing it around a ton.
You're right about that. And that's never been the case for him before. As good as he's been every year in total fantasy finishes, he has also been very limited relatively in volume. I gave you his rankings for his fantasy finishes already. For his attempts, he ranks quarterback 25, quarterback 22, quarterback 19, quarterback 17, quarterback 15, and last year when he was QB1, he was quarterback 6 in attempts.
And like we said, those seasons were anchored by one of the best defenses in the league, where you can kill the clock with the run game, establish a lead, sit on it with that great defense protecting you on the backside, which he's not going to have this year.
No,
with the volume he is likely to see this year in the passing game, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he's going to finish QB1 this season.
Again, back-to-back QB1 because he was QB1 last year. And I agree. I think the Seahawks used to be a team that could grind out wins counting on their defense. That is no longer a luxury they have. And like you said, they're going to be in a lot of shootouts, and the cap is going to come completely off of Russell Wilson's volume. And he's going to go nuts.
Now, the only concern I have, he's got the 30th ranked offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
It was not good last season. They didn't address it this season. He's going to be running for his life and trying to create plays and getting the ball out of his hand. Now, my concern is he's going to be under fire relentlessly. Is he going to be able to make it 16 games and stay healthy? Every season, we see a big-name quarterback going down with injury. Last year, it was Aaron Rodgers. It was Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz. So I just fear that. I love how much value he has, and he could be the highest fantasy scoring player this season. But the risk to me is that I know he's going to be running for his life.
He will be.
And I'm just fearful that he's not going to survive it.
He will be, and that's why we need to bring this back to relativity for our listeners. He's going 60 to 65. At that point in the draft, I don't like going quarterback. I know you kind of disagree a little bit depending on who's there. But the upside of Russell Wilson, I'm not going to blame anybody if they want to take him. But going a little bit ahead of him, TB12 and Deshaun Watson. Going a little behind him, Drew Brees, Carson Wentz. So he's amidst great elite company.
Right.
So, I mean, you can't really go wrong with any of those 5. It's just a matter of how has your draft gone to that point? Who do you like the most? Are you somebody like me who absolutely loves Jared Goff and has absolutely no problem, quote, reaching on him in the 10th or 11th as opposed to the 12th or the 13th? I mean, there's varying opinions, but I'm not going to blame anybody for taking Russell Wilson at that point in their draft.
No. I mean, anytime you can have possibly the highest scoring fantasy player on your team, that's obviously a great thing. For me, that 60 to 65 range is the perfect spot to grab a quarterback. And if Tom Brady goes first and Deshaun Watson goes second and Russell Wilson is left over for you, pulling him as the third quarterback off the board,
sure,
I would be ecstatic with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt. He's finished as a top 3 quarterback as many times as he's finished a top 11 quarterback. There's been 3 years where he's QB3, QB1, 3 years where he's QB8, QB10, QB11. His floor is insanely high. I think he's a lock QB1 It's just a matter of is he going to be that 5 to 10 range, or is he going to be that 1 to 5 range?
I would love to have that on my team, but again, it just makes me a little bit nervous because I know he's going to be running for his life.
The quarterback position to me is always a deep one, but I'll tell you what, it's insane this year to me how deep the quarterback position seems, and I have zero problem waiting forever and a day on quarterbacks this year, unlike any other year before.
Which is great for the league, and I'm glad you brought up how deep the quarterback position is, because the next team we have seems to be the only one in the division where it's underwhelming.
It really is. I mean, we've got Sam Bradford for the Arizona Cardinals. He's been in the league 8 years. He's missed the equivalent of 3 full seasons in that time due to a variety of injuries. It could be Josh Rosen time at any moment, but oh wait, this guy's not durable either.
I mean, what do you say about
on top, well, wait, Jay, they've got a great offensive line, right? No. They've got one of the worst offensive lines in the league. So you've got bad offensive line, you've got ouchie quarterbacks. There are 2 guys on this team, to me, worth owning in fantasy this year, David Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald. Everybody else, I'm staying completely away from unless they prove otherwise.
Well, and that's the thing. Who does he have around him to throw to and take the pressure off? Yeah, he's got Larry Fitzgerald, who we'll get to him later, but he's another year older. His receiving core, other than that, is extremely young. David Johnson's coming back off an injury, although it was not knee or anything like that, so he should be good. But like you said, he doesn't have an offensive line. They have a difficult schedule. So
well, I'll say this. He's a 62% career guy when he is on the field. He has 101 touchdowns to 50 interceptions in 80 games played. He is a very smart, competent, capable quarterback if he can stay healthy. That's a big if for him. He's got a shoddy offensive line. Unless this guy is going to be doing 3-step drops all day, getting the ball off really quick, I just don't see it at all.
He's going undrafted, and that's because you can't trust him to be on the field.
Right.
Like you said, he's been okay when he's been on the field, but he's just not on the field enough for me. And the other player waiting in his wings is the rookie Josh Rosen. I'm going to just go out there and say I was not a big fan of him. Yeah. Didn't like the attitude, don't really care for the player. He's also going undrafted.
He missed 8 games in his last 2 years at UCLA on top of everything else you just said.
Well, it's perfect that he's backing up Sam Bradford then.
Go ahead. I think we've talked about all the fantasy relevant quarterbacks in this division, and that'll wrap it up for the quarterback. And now we can go ahead and move on. Next up is going to be the running backs in the NFC West. Stay tuned.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. Don't forget, you can find us at fantasyforesight.com.
And you can use the links at the bottom of the page to find us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at ForesightBen, at ForesightJ, and at Total Foresight. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
You already found this podcast, but you can find it on Google Play and iTunes, and you can find our app in the App Store.
All right, that does it for us. We'll see everybody next time. Thanks a lot, and have a great night.